Hey there, Sula here from MistyHilltops.com. Thanks for stopping by. I'm finally finishing up my 4x6 mini album, and in this video I want to take you through the process of binding in it and then putting it together with a cover. So here I have prepared a bunch of little paper strips from cardstock actually, and they will become the binding of the book. And I kind of made a little gusset there so that there's enough room for just embellishments and all that. So I'm using cardstock, and because I used differently colored cardstock, I just used the different colors of the cardstock in the binding as well, so that it would go exactly with the same color as on the page. And so I'm just making sure that I am using the correct order of the colors. Usually in any normal kind of album, you would just use one kind of color cardstock, I guess. At least that's what I usually do. It's an exception with this one that I used three or four, actually four different colors for my background pages. And so I'm just making sure that I'm using the same color of the binding for each of the pages that I am using, so that, or each of the color cardstock that I'm using for my pages, so that it is continuous. So these paper strips, I easily created them in silhouette. It's just a paper strip where again in the middle I leave a little bit of a gusset. So like this one is tiny because I knew I hadn't added anything very bulky to my album. I kept away from all these, and so I didn't need wider ones, although I did create wider ones that I then ended up not using because I realized actually every page is not all that thick. And then so they need to be folded, and then I have to then glue them just side by side. And I skipped a whole lot. I wasn't going to take you through the entire process here because obviously that would be far too redundant to do that. So I just left it where I just each side I just glue to another side, and so they basically go back to back, and this is the binding for all of them. And then the way I created this album was I just had these each page I created on its own cardstock. If there was a pattern paper that fully covered the cardstock, sometimes I saved myself a cardstock, just mainly for the reason of avoiding it to become more bulky, because the cardstock is somewhat thick too. So then when I glued it, I made sure that I left a gap in the gluing on one of the sides that I knew was going to go with a binding, because then I put glue on those binding strips there, and then that puts the whole book together. So this is what I'm doing with every page there. There is the binding, there's that strip that comes up, and so first I glue the two pages together, but I make sure I don't go all the way to the end of basically, I guess, the right side there. Here I think I might have forgotten, and then I realized, I need to go quickly so that it doesn't dry. Don't see me press it down at this one, because I wanted it to be able to still get go between before it's actually glued down. Now I can start pressing the two pages together, and it goes fine there. And so I'm going again with the next page, and here I am actually leaving that gap, so because I put glue on that strip, that flap that needs to have the that I created for the attachment there. So that's where the glue goes on, and because of that I can leave that gap open, and so I can easily just slide in that page and have it adhered to the binding here. And so it's a very easy process. It's a little mundane because it's just the same and I had a lot of pages actually for this album, but overall it's a very simple process. I just created 4x6 background papers, like the cardstock background, on which I then put my design. Then I glued the binding strips together. Now I am adding the individual pages so I'm gluing them back to back and then gluing the binding in between, and that's the process of this. So it's a very simple process, and here I have finished that, and I get ready to now work on the cover pages, the front and the back cover. And clearly it's going to be the same thing. There will be cardstock that goes to the front and go like back to back. So I left the first page and the last page of my album, I didn't yet glue anywhere, because I knew that it's that one flap. You see it's a red flap there, and so one flap is left over in the front and one flap is left over in the back, and so this is where the front cover and the back cover will be once I glue the two pages together. And here I was paying attention because there will be that back binding piece that will cover up the binding, and so I made sure that mostly the side that will not be covered up is nicely visible. And here I realized, I put the glue in everywhere when I didn't mean to yet. So I'm just making sure that everything is correct with the directions, and now I can start actually gluing it down to the page here. And this was a little bit of a fiddling around because the glue just didn't want to really stick here. I guess I hadn't put enough glue on the page or something, so there was a lot of fiddling around and trying to press it down, and then I realized I really need to add more glue in between because there was gaps and I didn't like those gaps. I wanted the two pieces of cardstock to really be stuck together. So here I'm noticing there's a big gap there, and so I just put glue in between. I love about my glue that I can just rub it off my fingers and it's not gonna mess with getting everything else messy. I can just have my fingers in the glue and just rub it off. It's just very nice and workable glue that I have. And so here I'm just now pressing the two parts together and making sure that that craft cardstock is really nice cardstock, but at the same time it also does not really want to stick very well, so I need to use some extra love and some extra glue there to get it to stick. But here I think I have finally gotten to the place where it's actually sticking together. And so this is the back cover. I'm not going to decorate the back side of the book. I just wanted to have the pretty pattern paper there. And I decided this paper because I realized I had only one small part in the book where I actually used that pattern paper, but I really loved the pattern paper. It's a strongly patterned paper, which is always a little bit difficult for me to work with. I don't like when my pages get too crazy with the patterns, even though I love the patterns. So, but I felt I could work it on the front page, but here again I wanted to make sure that the side that will not be covered up is actually has everything glued well, and then there's on the left side of this page, that's where it doesn't have to be perfect because I can just cover it up with a back binding. Then here I have a little stamp, and I'm before I wanted to put this onto the album, which makes everything more difficult to work with. I wanted to make sure that I decorate the front of the page there. So that's the front cover. And obviously with wet ink, I just always managed to kind of get it a little messy, but it was okay. It wasn't a big deal. So here I have just, because it's from 2022, and so I have the little, this is from a Tim Holtz die. Then I just die cut the number 2022, and then I had from one of my stamps I used October, and that goes onto a strip from another set from the Tim Holtz chapter 3 one of them is the postal, the other one is the envelope. I think I keep forgetting the names of those die sets that I'm using, but it kind of fit exactly onto this little paper strip there. That's basically a label from that. And then here I have this great alpha that is like a wood grain alpha. But before I start to glue that down, I really wanted to go ahead and start to glue this part label down. And because the ink, the stamping ink was still wet, I didn't want to just press it down with my fingers because I knew I was going to smudge it up. And so here I just used one of my toothpicks to just gently push it down. It's the toothpick that I use for gluing things, so it has a nice rounded tip on both sides now, full of glue, which is just fine to press something down without actually poking a hole into what I was pressing down there. And again, this is a beautiful alpha that is really big, really nice, has the wood grain, so it just perfectly fit with the theme here. Now I had this leaf left over, and I thought, oh, I might stick it down there as well. And then here is the little gap that I left when I glued these two pages back to back. Again, I'll leave a gap on that side so that I can slide that glue flap right in between those two pages, and that becomes the binding that kind of becomes hidden between the two pages. And I actually didn't really use much of my silhouette except for print and cut for this. I didn't really use much, like I just used my trimmer to cut the sizes of the page. And then here is the back piece. I used the silhouette, I designed it in the silhouette. I just stole the little like the little kind of decorative edge from another design that I have in my silhouette library, and then just measured how thick the book was. And what is very important to me when I create books with bindings and stuff, when I create my mini albums that are not ringed in any way, I do use ring binding as well, or even the discs like the Happy planners use. But in this case, I wanted to use just a real binding. But you notice I do not put any glue on the main centerpiece there. I only put glue on the two outside flaps, the one that goes on the front and then one that goes on the back side of this book. But the actual binding piece on the back side does not have any glue. And I do that very much on purpose so that I can open my book and it can open flat all the way. And you can see there's the bulk, and so it opens flatly every page. If I had glued that down to the back of the page, then I would not be able to easily open this book. So I just observed it from other books when you look at books, and so in my bindings I always make sure I don't actually glue down the center part of it. Anyway, this is my book finally done, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Consider subscribing, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.